T's was referred to as a Tin Lizzie, and that name come from the Model T going up Pikes Peak, and they had to stop every 100 feet or so and put water in it because they didn't have a water pump, and so it took quite a while, but they won it over everything else, the Model T, and so it would come back down the hill, and so but they called the Model T the Lizzie originally, and because the Lizzie came from somebody's name, because if they didn't like somebody, they'd name their Model T after them. Let's say that would be Bertha. So then, well, we're going to take Bertha to town. But when that Model T came down and won the trip, so some woman was sitting there, and she says, that Tin Lizzie won the Pikes Peak race. So that's where the Tin Lizzie came from for it. But they'd all, as I say, most of the people they just didn't like some woman. They'd name that Model T after them. But it was a heck of a thing. It's a heck of a lot better than walking, because it would go 14 or 15 miles an hour, where a horse and wagon would go 2 or 3. So see, it was quite a treat. And anybody had a nice one like that, and the cars they'd have a little trunk on the back, and they called that a bucket. And then they referred to that as a T bucket. That means that they had a Model T with a bucket. So that was about as cheap as you could get. And they sold for about $15 in the 30s.
What was your Tin Lizzie called?
My dad never married. I don't think he ever named it, but he might have named it several times. But it would be somebody back from Detroit that he didn't like. If somebody probably in the family. But then again, all the people who would come up in the summer to see us, they'd stay there in one of the sheds he built for a couple of years. Then they finally started bringing a trailer up. By 37, my uncle had a 37 Buick he bought because it would pull a house trailer, and they would stay in that for the 3 months. But come fall, when they'd go, boy, I'd go down by the swamp, because the swamp had a little ridge along there that you could sit on with some trees, little trees. And I'd sit down there and cry because it was so lonesome they'd be gone, after really having fun with them all summer. My aunt was so nice to us. When my uncle come up, he'd take us to town and buy us a hot beef sandwich, and boy, it was such a treat when they would be there, because he had trucks and he worked hard in Detroit. And he was on 3rd Street, a couple of blocks from where I toddled. That's how my aunt met him, on 3rd Street. And but I think really how he got in the trucking business, when my dad left, my dad had an expressing business, but that he made more money out of the blind pig. So my uncle took over the trucking stuff from my dad and built it into a big thing. But the union people goofing off so much, he finally went broke. He had maybe 10 trucks, but some mornings I'd go to work, and I worked in this gas station later on in life when I was after 17. But they'd be out there in the morning, all the trucks running for an hour or so with the headlights on, the steam going up. And I told my uncle about it, and then he told the union steward about it, and boy, he was mad. And he told me, boy, so those guys all like you, but if they knew what you said, because they were organized. So my uncle didn't have any control over them. But that was during the days of working for Speedy Cartage in the gas station. Then I went across to the freight docks and handled freight.